Let me see how he will travel and sign that $2 million deal.
"You're going to lose everything," she whispered into the phone, thinking he was asleep. She was right, just not about who was going to lose it. If someone quietly destroyed everything you built for them, your money, your name, your future, and they were sitting across from you at the breakfast table every morning smiling like nothing happened, what would you do? Most people would rage. Most people would confront. Most people would break. Ethan Brooks was not most people, but we'll get to that. First, let's talk about what he lost, or rather, what she tried to take. If you've ever given everything to someone and watched them hand it to someone else, stay with this story, because what happens next is going to hit you somewhere deep. Ethan Brooks grew up in Beaumont, Texas, 40 miles east of Houston, in a house where the air conditioner only worked half the time and the refrigerator was always more empty than full. His father worked the refineries. His mother worked 2 jobs. Neither of them complained. They just worked. That discipline became Ethan's religion. By 32, he had built Brooks Flow Energy Solutions from a rented office with second-hand furniture into a mid-sized oil and gas servicing firm with 14 full-time employees and contracts across the Gulf Coast. He did it without investors, without family money, without shortcuts. He drove a used pickup truck until the company hit its 3rd profitable year. He moved into a proper house in the Heights neighborhood of Houston only when he could pay cash. He wore the same watch his father gave him at 18, a plain Seiko with a scratched crystal, even after he could afford 5 Rolexes. That was Ethan, and he loved Jessica with that same quietness. Steady, constant, not always loud about it, but always there. They met at a work function in 2015. She was at the event with a girlfriend, laughing at something across the room, and Ethan had been drawn to the laugh before he ever saw the face. By the time he walked over, he already felt something shift inside him that he didn't fully understand until much later. They married in 2017. She wore a dress she designed herself, and he cried at the altar in front of 200 people and didn't apologize for a single tear. He was that kind of man. In the early years, the marriage was warm and real. Jessica was clever, creative, and genuinely funny in a way that surprised people who only knew her from a distance. She had a gift for style, the kind of eye that could walk into a bare room and immediately know what it needed. She talked about fashion the way Ethan talked about pipe specifications and flow rates, with real love, real knowledge, real passion. So when she mentioned 3 years into the marriage that she wanted to open a boutique, Ethan didn't hesitate. He didn't just say yes. He made it happen. He pulled $120,000 from the savings he had built before they were married. He hired a lawyer to register the business, Jess & Company, and because he wanted her to feel the full pride of ownership, he put it in her name. He found the retail space in Midtown. He helped paint the walls on a Saturday in November, blue tape along the baseboards, roller in hand, while she picked out fixtures on her laptop. He did all of it because he loved her. He also funded the build-out, covered the first 6 months of lease payments until the boutique started generating revenue, and co-signed the business line of credit, so she could buy inventory without cash flow pressure. All of it without a single contract between them, without a single condition, because she was his wife. The trouble with success is that it demands more of you just when you think you've earned the right to slow down. Brooks Flow landed its first major institutional contract in 2021, a servicing agreement with a mid-size exploration company operating platforms in the Gulf. It was a real contract, the kind that changed your trajectory, but it came with a cost. It came with travel, weeks at a time in Corpus Christi, then Louisiana, then a significant bid opportunity that required months of groundwork in the UAE. Ethan never stopped calling. He never missed a birthday. He sent gifts that proved he was paying attention, but he wasn't there. And for Jessica, that started to mean something. She wouldn't say it directly, not to Ethan, not fully. She said it to her friend Tanya in pieces, over wine on Thursday evenings when Ethan was somewhere on the Gulf Coast, and the house felt very large and very quiet. "He loves the company more than he loves me," she told Tanya one night. Tanya, who had watched Ethan spend a Saturday painting a boutique he didn't own, said, "That's not what I see." But Jessica had already stopped looking. Marcus Holt came back into her life the way old flames sometimes do. Through a mutual friend's social media post, a comment that led to a message that led to a call. He and Jessica had dated briefly during their last year of university. It hadn't ended badly. There was no dramatic breakup. They had simply moved in different directions, and the connection dissolved before it had a chance to become something permanent. Now he was back in Houston, running a small energy services consulting firm. He was charming and attentive and made time for her in ways that Ethan, stretched thin across 2 time zones and a pending contract worth $2 million, currently couldn't. It started as lunch, then dinner, then the kind of conversations that happened too late at night with too much honesty in them. By the time Ethan noticed something had shifted in his marriage, it had already shifted past the point of easy return. He noticed the small things first. The way she angled her phone screen away when he walked into the room. The way she said fine when he asked how her day was, in a tone that meant the opposite of fine, but also meant don't ask follow-up questions. The way she stopped sitting in the same room as him in the evenings. Ethan was a man who paid attention to details. It was why he was good at engineering. It was why his bids were precise, and his proposals were rarely rejected. He paid attention now. He didn't confront her. Not yet. He wasn't that kind of man. And he also wasn't ready to know what he was beginning to suspect. Instead, he did what he always did when the situation was serious. He got methodical. He installed a small wireless camera in the living room. The kind sold for home security, barely larger than a coin, mounted to a bookshelf beside the family photos, and he watched. Not obsessively, not every night, but enough. What he saw over the following 6 weeks made him feel like the floor had opened up beneath him. He saw the evening Marcus came over while Ethan was supposed to be in Galveston. He saw the way they moved together in the kitchen, easy and comfortable, with the familiarity of people who had stopped pretending they were just friends. He sat in a hotel room in Galveston with his laptop open and his hands very still and watched the footage for a long time. He didn't call her. He didn't book an early flight home. He sat there, and something that might have been grief moved through him quietly. And then, with the same discipline that had built Brooks Flow from a rented office into a real company, he began to plan. The contract was the biggest opportunity Brooks Flow had ever chased. $2 million. A 3-year servicing agreement with Dalton Energy, a Qatari-backed exploration company with new drilling operations in the Gulf. The winning firm would handle equipment maintenance, compliance inspections, and crew logistics across 4 platforms. Ethan had been working on the proposal for 8 months. There were 2 serious bidders, Brooks Flow and Holt Consulting, Marcus's firm. Ethan had known for months that Marcus was his competitor on the contract. What he didn't know, not until he reviewed the hidden camera footage with the kind of cold precision that a man uses when he has already decided to stop hoping, was that Jessica had been sharing his bid numbers with Marcus. Not all of them, not the final figures, but enough. Enough to tell Marcus roughly where Brooks Flow was pricing its labor, roughly what service margins Ethan was working with, enough to give Holt Consulting a structural advantage going into final negotiations. She had been sitting across the dinner table from him, asking him how the proposal was going, and then relaying his answers to the man she was sleeping with. Ethan watched the footage. He listened to the calls. He documented everything with the methodical patience of a man who had spent years writing engineering reports where imprecision could cost lives. And then he did something Jessica didn't know about. He booked a flight to Dubai. Not to escape, to move. Because the decision-maker for the Dalton Energy contract, a senior director named Walid Al-Farsi, was going to be in Dubai for a procurement conference in 10 days. And Ethan had used the previous 6 months to build a quiet, professional relationship with Al-Farsi through a mutual contact in the Houston energy sector. He told Jessica he was going to Corpus Christi. He went to Dubai. The meeting with Walid Al-Farsi lasted 3 hours across 2 sessions over 2 days. Ethan came prepared. He always came prepared. He brought a technical proposal binder with updated pricing, revised labor estimates, and a third-party compliance certification that Marcus's firm couldn't match because Holt Consulting was too small to qualify for it. He brought a reference letter from the exploration company he had serviced in the Gulf for 18 months. He brought a 3-year maintenance projection with risk modeling. And on the second day, in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a hotel in the Dubai marina, Walid Al-Farsi extended his hand across the table. Ethan shook it. The contract was signed. $2 million. 3 years. Brooks Flow Energy Solutions. The funds were structured to flow into a business account Ethan had specifically reorganized 3 weeks earlier. Linked not to the joint accounts he shared with Jessica, but to a children's trust he had quietly established through a family law attorney in Houston. The trust was clean. It was legal. It was ironclad. He flew home from Dubai without telling her where he had been. He kissed her on the cheek when he walked through the door. She made him coffee and asked how Corpus Christi was. He said it was fine. Here is where you need to understand something about Ethan Brooks. He was not a cruel man. He was not calculating in the way that people mean when they use that word as an insult. He had not mapped out Jessica's destruction the day he found the footage and decided to punish her for sport. What he had done was something quieter and sadder than that. He had given her time. For 6 weeks after he installed a camera and saw what he saw, he had waited, not to gather evidence, not to plan revenge. He had waited because some part of him, some stubborn, loyal, Beaumont-raised part of him, kept hoping she would stop, kept hoping she would come to him on some ordinary Tuesday and tell him the truth and give him something to work with. She didn't. She got deeper in. And so Ethan, with a signed $2 million contract locked into a children's trust that Jessica's name was not on, came home and waited again. He had one more thing to see. He needed to know what she would do when she thought the contract was still in play. He needed to know how far she would go. He didn't have to wait long. The night before the official contract announcement, the date the industry publication would post the award and Brooks Flow would formally notify their team, Ethan made a show of it. He left the contract documents on the kitchen island while he was in the shower, not carelessly, deliberately. He wanted her to see the Dubai confirmation page. He wanted her to understand what was at stake, or what she thought was at stake. He came downstairs in a t-shirt and found her standing at the kitchen island. She was smiling at him. "Big day tomorrow," she said. "Biggest yet," he agreed. She hugged him. He held her for a moment. Then he went to bed. He did not sleep. He lay in the dark and listened. At 2 a.m, he heard her get up. She moved quietly through the hallway. He heard the low murmur of her voice, the careful, private tone of someone who believed the person next to them was sound asleep. He heard her open the kitchen drawer, where they kept documents. Then he heard her in the home office, the drawer where he kept travel documents. Then silence for a long time. Then the low, soft sound of something tearing. He stared at the ceiling. His visa was in that drawer. His passport was in a separate pocket of his travel bag. He had quietly moved it 3 days ago, along with every other important document. The visa alone wouldn't stop him. But she didn't know that. She thought a torn visa was a grounded flight. At 2:47 in the morning, he heard her talking to Marcus on the phone, her voice as low and careful as a woman who believed she had just won. "It's done. He's not going anywhere tomorrow. You'll win the contract, and then we can finally move forward with a divorce and get out of this." She came back to bed 20 minutes later. She lay down beside him. She was asleep in minutes. Ethan lay next to her in the dark and breathed slowly and thought about a Saturday in November when he had a paint roller in his hand, and she was laughing at something on her laptop, and the day felt simple and good, and he had no idea what was coming. He thought about all the breakfasts and all the calls from hotel rooms and all the anniversaries he had tried to honor from a road. He thought about the man in his living room who had sat in his chair and drunk from his glasses and stolen his bid numbers. He thought about $2 million sitting quietly inside a trust that had his children's names on it. Then he closed his eyes. Morning was coming, and with it, everything she never saw coming. She made him scrambled eggs in the morning. That was the part Ethan would think about later, not with anger, but with a kind of hollow wonder at how completely a person could hide themselves behind ordinary things. She stood at the stove in her robe, spatula in hand, humming something low under her breath, and she made him scrambled eggs with the toast cut diagonally the way he liked it. She set the plate in front of him. She poured his coffee. She sat across from him and asked if he'd slept well. "Like a rock," he said. She smiled and looked down at her own cup. Ethan ate his eggs. They were good. She had always been a better cook than she gave herself credit for. He was going to miss that. The call came at 9:17 in the morning. He was in his home office. Door open, laptop on, the picture of a man who had nowhere to be. When he heard her phone ring in the kitchen, he heard the careful way she answered. He heard the low, controlled excitement in her voice as she slipped out onto the back patio to take it. Marcus, almost certainly, calling to celebrate. She was out there for 11 minutes. When she came back inside, she was wearing the same expression people wear when they're trying not to look like they just won something. She found Ethan at the kitchen island, pouring a second cup of coffee. "You okay?" she asked. "Completely," he said. She tilted her head slightly, the small, practiced gesture of a woman performing concern. "I was thinking, since the trip is delayed, maybe we could have dinner somewhere nice tonight. Take a breath. It's been a crazy season." Delayed, not canceled. She was giving the situation room to breathe, room for the story to hold. "That sounds good," Ethan said. "Let me make a few calls first." She nodded and disappeared upstairs. He stood at the kitchen island and drank his coffee slowly. Then he picked up his phone and called his attorney, Darnell Whitfield, a man he had known for 11 years, who had structured Brooks Flow's first corporate agreements and who had, for weeks ago, quietly filed the paperwork on the children's trust. He told Darnell they were moving to the next phase. Darnell said he was ready. Ethan said thank you and hung up. Then he called his operations director, a woman named Portia Sims, and told her to prepare the internal announcement. Brooks Flow had won the Dalton contract. The team would be notified today. Press release to go out by noon. Portia made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a shout. Ethan smiled for the first time in a long time. The press release hit at 12:03. Brooks Flow Energy Solutions awarded $2 million Dalton Energy Gulf servicing contract. Ethan watched it happen in real time from his home office. The LinkedIn notifications, the industry board messages. The text from his father that just said, "Proud of you, son," in all capitals with no punctuation, because his father had never fully trusted punctuation on a phone. He watched something else happen too. At 12:11, Marcus Holt's firm released a brief statement through their social media saying they looked forward to future opportunities in the Gulf market. The careful language of a man who had just lost badly and needed to save face. At 12:19, Jessica walked past the office doorway, glanced at the screen and stopped. Her eyes moved across the headline. She read it once, then again. The color in her face changed in a way that happened too fast for her control. The contract was already awarded? Her voice was very even. Too even. 2 weeks ago, Ethan said, "I signed in Dubai." A beat. A very long beat. "You were in Corpus Christi 2 weeks ago." "I told you I was in Corpus Christi," he said. "I was in Dubai." She stood in the doorway, and the understanding moved across her face in layers. Slow at first, then all at once, like a wall coming down. She recovered quickly. She was good at that. "That's incredible. Ethan, that's amazing." She stepped into the office and hugged him from behind his chair, her arms around his shoulders. "I'm so proud of you." He let her hug him. He said thank you. She left the room. He heard her on the phone 3 minutes later. Back patio again, voice too low to catch through the glass. But he didn't need to hear it. He knew what that call sounded like. He had been documenting calls like that for 6 weeks. What he hadn't told her yet, what she didn't know and wouldn't know until the moment he chose, was that the bid numbers she had passed to Marcus hadn't been real. Starting 5 weeks ago, Ethan had begun feeding her information that was carefully, deliberately wrong. Not wildly wrong. Not obviously wrong. Just wrong enough. Labor costs nudged up by 12%. Mobilization estimates inflated. Service margins tweaked in a direction that made Brooks Flow look slightly more expensive than it actually was. The kind of numbers that, if you were building competitive bid around them, would lead you to undercut in the wrong places and overprice in others. Marcus had built his entire proposal around those numbers. Ethan knew this because his contact in the procurement office, a man who owed Ethan a professional favor from a joint project 3 years back, had quietly confirmed that Holt Consulting's bid had been structurally misaligned in ways that raised internal questions about the quality of their market intelligence. Marcus had lost a contract, not just because Brooks Flow was better. He had lost it because he had trusted stolen information that had been designed to make him lose. Ethan had never once lied to Jessica about what the numbers were. He had simply stopped telling her the true ones. The family meeting happened on a Sunday. Ethan arranged it the way he arranged everything. Quietly, methodically, without announcing what was for. He asked Jessica's parents, Rodney and Claudette, to come for lunch. He asked her older brother Dwayne and Dwayne's wife, Patrice. He called Pastor Elmore Gibbs, who had married him 7 years earlier and who Jessica trusted more than she trusted most people. He made the invitation sound like a family appreciation lunch. Nothing alarming. He said he wanted to celebrate the contract with the people who mattered. Jessica dressed carefully that morning. She seemed lighter than she had in weeks, almost relieved, as if the thing she had tried to do and failed had somehow released the pressure rather than increased it. She didn't know yet that Ethan knew about the visa. She thought that secret was still safely buried under a torn document in a trash bag she had taken to the outdoor bin herself. The family arrived at 1 o'clock. Claudette brought sweet potato pie. Rodney shook Ethan's hand with the genuine warmth of a man who had watched his son-in-law build something real and respected it. Dwayne was loud and laughing at the door. Pastor Gibbs arrived last, quiet and observant, the way he always was. They ate lunch. Ethan was a gracious host. He refilled drinks. He laughed at Dwayne's stories. He complimented Claudette's pie twice. Jessica sat at the other end of the table and watched him with an expression she couldn't quite flatten into neutral. Something careful and watchful behind her eyes. When the plates were cleared, Ethan set his napkin on the table and stood. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he said. "I told you this was a celebration, and it is." Brooks Flow just closed the biggest contract in the company's history. Applause. Rodney's proud handshake again. Claudette's hug. "But there's something else I need to share with this family," Ethan said. "And I want to share it here with everyone who loves us, because I think the truth deserves witnesses." The room shifted. He pulled out a laptop and set it on the table. He pressed play. The first recording was a phone call from the night of the torn visa. Jessica's voice came to the laptop speaker, clear and unhurried. "At 2:47 in the morning. It's done. He's not going anywhere tomorrow. You'll win the contract, and then we can finally move forward with the divorce and get out of this." Silence in the dining room. Claudette put her fork down. Rodney was very still. Pastor Gibbs folded his hands on the table and looked at Jessica. Jessica's eyes were fixed on the laptop. Her jaw was set hard. Ethan played 3 more recordings. He didn't play all of them. He didn't need to. He played enough. The call where she told Marcus the bid numbers. The call where they discussed how the divorce would go and what she expected to take. The footage from the living room. Marcus in the house. The two of them together in a way that required no further explanation. Dwayne stood up and walked to the window. Patrice put her hand over her mouth. Claudette was crying quietly with no sound, just tears moving down her face, and she was looking at her daughter the way a person looks at someone they don't fully recognize. "Jessica." Rodney's voice was very quiet, the kind of quiet that is not calm. Jessica didn't look at her father. She was looking at Ethan. "You recorded me," she said. Her voice was controlled, but something was fracturing underneath it. "I installed a home security camera in our home," Ethan said, "which is legal in Texas. You set me up." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "I gave you 6 weeks to come to me. 6 weeks where I knew what was happening, and I said nothing because I wanted to give you the chance to choose differently." He paused. "You used those 6 weeks to tear my travel documents, pass my business information to a competitor, and plan a divorce that was designed to take as much from me as possible." Another pause. "I didn't set you up, Jessica. I watched you make decisions." Pastor Gibbs spoke then, softly. "Jessica, is any of what's on these recordings untrue?" Jessica said nothing, which was its own answer. Darnell Whitfield filed the divorce petition on Monday morning. It was not a surprise to anyone in the proceedings who had been in that dining room on Sunday. Rodney had driven Jessica to her parents' house that evening. Not in anger exactly, but in the heavy silence of a man who needed distance to understand what he was feeling. Claudette had embraced Ethan at the door with the tearful apology of a woman who kept saying, I didn't know, and Ethan had held her shoulders gently and told her he knew she didn't. Dwayne hadn't said much. He clapped Ethan on the back on his way out and looked at him with the pained expression of a man caught between blood and fairness. Ethan understood. The divorce moved efficiently because the evidence was comprehensive and the law in Texas was clear. The boutique, Jess & Company, was registered in Jessica's name but had been funded entirely by Ethan's premarital savings. Darnell presented the receipts, the bank transfers, the registered documentation. Texas courts took a dim view of marital waste and fraud. The boutique was awarded to Ethan in the settlement, and he sold it 4 months later to a young designer from Austin for $85,000, which he put into the children's trust. The house was in Ethan's name, had always been. She had to vacate within 60 days. The joint accounts were split according to the court's guidelines, with the adultery documentation and economic sabotage shifting the division significantly in Ethan's favor. Marcus Holt's name appeared in the divorce filing as a corresponding party. It also appeared through a formal complaint Ethan's attorney filed with the industry regulatory body in an investigation into the improper use of confidential bid information. The investigation took 4 months and concluded with a formal censure against Holt Consulting and the suspension of their industry certification for 18 months. Marcus's firm did not survive it. He had built too much of his reputation on the Gulf sector. With the certification suspended, 2 major prospective clients walked. He let 3 employees go in the first month. By the time the censure was public record, his name in Houston energy circles had the particular quality of something people mentioned carefully, in lowered voices, when they mentioned it at all. He did not call Jessica after the investigation became public. He did not answer when she called him. There's a moment in every consequence where the person facing it finally understands the full shape of what they have lost. For Jessica, that moment came on a Wednesday afternoon in October. She was standing outside the boutique, Jess & Company, the store with the fixtures she had chosen, the walls painted the colors she had picked, the sign above the door with letters she had designed, watching 2 men carry display racks to a van for the new owner's renovation. She had driven past without intending to stop. She had stopped anyway. She stood on the sidewalk in the October light and watched the inside of the store being disassembled piece by piece. And she thought about a Saturday in November 8 years ago when Ethan had stood inside that same space with a paint roller and a level, working without complaint, working because she had a dream and he wanted to be part of it. A woman came out of the boutique and noticed her standing there. "Can I help you?" "No," Jessica said. "I used to own this place." The woman looked at her for a moment. "Oh, well, it's going to be beautiful. We have big plans for it." "I know," Jessica said. "I had big plans too." She got back in her car. She sat there for a long time. Ethan didn't celebrate the way people in these stories sometimes do. He didn't make a speech. He didn't post anything online. He didn't call anyone to say, "I told you so," because that had never been the point. What he did was take his 2 kids, Zara, who was 6, and Caleb, who was 4, to a state park outside of Austin for a long weekend in November. They hiked trails that Caleb mostly needed to be carried on. They made sandwiches by a creek. Zara caught a grasshopper and named it Gerald, and was genuinely devastated when Gerald escaped back into the grass. Ethan laughed until he had tears on his face. He hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Brooks Flo's Dalton contract was running smoothly. Portia Sims had taken on an expanded operations role and was, by every measure, the best professional decision he had made in 3 years. 2 smaller contracts had come in on the back of the Dalton announcement. The company had grown to 19 employees. He still wore the scratch Seiko. He had also, quietly, started looking at solar infrastructure, the next energy frontier, the direction the Gulf Coast was slowly turning. He had lunch with an engineer from a renewable development company in Austin and came home with 6 pages of notes and a particular light in his eyes that appeared when he found something worth building. He was not broken. He had never been broken. He was just a man from Beaumont who had learned early that the most dangerous thing you could underestimate was someone who loved you and said nothing while they waited for you to make a choice. Sometime after the divorce was finalized, Jessica wrote him a letter, not an email, an actual letter, in her handwriting, sent to the Brooks Flo office because she no longer had his home address. He read it twice. She wrote that she was sorry, not in compressed, tactical way of someone managing consequences, but in a longer, more painful way of someone who had arrived at genuine regret through genuine loss. She wrote about the loneliness she had felt during those years of his travel, and she wrote it without using the loneliness as an excuse, which told him she had done some real thinking. She wrote that she had spent a long time blaming him for what she had done, and had only recently been honest enough to stop. She did not ask for anything. She just wrote it. Ethan read it twice and then placed it in the same folder where he kept the recordings. He thought about the breakfast she had made in the morning after she tore the visa, the scrambled eggs, the coffee, the toast cut diagonally. He thought about how a person could love someone and still become capable of something like that. He had spent a long time trying to understand it and had eventually arrived at this. People do not become their worst moments all at once. They get there through small choices, accumulated quietly over time, each one easier than the last because the previous one didn't destroy them. He did not write back, not because he hated her, but because there was nothing left to say that the truth hadn't already said better. There's one last thing. The thing Jessica said that night in the dining room. You planned all this, you set me up from the beginning, was not entirely wrong, but it was not entirely right either. Ethan had planned, yes, but not from the beginning. He had planned from the moment he sat in a hotel room in Galveston with a laptop and watched a man sit in his chair and realized that the woman he had given everything to had made a different choice. Before that moment, there had been no plan. There had only been a marriage he believed in, a company he was building, a family he would have worked all his life to protect. She had been the one to decide that wasn't enough. He had simply made sure that when she reached for what she thought she'd gain, there was nothing there. What remained was what had always been his. The company, the kids, the scratched Seiko on his wrist, and the quiet knowledge that he had never, at any point in this entire story, become someone he was ashamed to be. The contract would grow. The children would grow. He would be there for all of it. She tore his visa to help her ex and escape her lonely marriage. All she tore was her own future apart. Have you ever given everything to someone and watched them hand it to someone else? Drop your story in the comments. You're not alone. Like if you believe real strength is staying quiet until the right moment. Subscribe and hit the bell. We release new stories every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next.